let's just talk about how your child's doing. And for us as parents, it was, hey, like we would just like to see that our child is our child known by you. So it was like, hey, how's our child doing? Well, let me tell you how they're doing. No. But how are they doing? Like, how are they?
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of collaboration and reflection as we seek to keep growing as teachers. So this podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hallway Conversations. My name is Matt Beamers.
I'm Dave Mulder.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
Richard Mouw has a wonderful book titled The Life of the Mind. It is a short but important book, and I encourage you to read it. Chapter 11 in that book is one I've read many times. It is titled Safe Spaces for Playing Around. In that chapter, Mouw says, quote, safe spaces are essential for intellectual explorations, end quote. And he shares a vignette of having a hallway conversation with a colleague that often concluded with the colleague stating, well, I have to go back to my office to play around with a few ideas. I think those lines capture what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a safe space for all of us, you and us, to learn together. And one of our deep hopes is that you might be encouraged to go back to your classroom, your staff room, or your hallway and play around with some ideas. If you are new to Hallway Conversations, one of us brings a question and we explore some of our thinking around it. Better yet, as much as we enjoy bringing our own questions, we relish getting questions from listeners. So we would like to hear from you. Please email us or send us a recording of your questions and we'll do our best to play around with it. Send your questions to hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Abby, I think you're bringing the question today.
Yes, I am. So I am coming off of parent-teacher conferences for my own kids this week. And it kind of prompted me to think about, as a teacher as well, and as a parent, what are some ways that we as schools and teachers can partner well with parents in the education of their kids?
Such a great question.
Yeah.
And I feel that every year around this time when we have the opportunities to connect.
Yeah.
It's a significant event, right?
Yeah.
Like it's...
It ain't nothing.
Can I ask so I love the question, so can I ask a clarifying question? You're using the word partnership.
Right.
So can you tell us why you're using that word partner? And I guess I'm asking you as a parent, like, why are you using the word partnership, and how might you see the school as a partnership? Because that as a partner, so yeah.
Right, and I think that's a hallmark of, Christian education that we as parents want for our kids, is that we feel like they are a partner in not only building the academic knowledge of our kids, but also in shaping their worldview and shaping their faith perspective, right? And they're definitely shaped by their school experiences. And so we hope that as much as we shape them, right, they're also positively shaped by the other adults and students in their lives.
And I would say that for myself too, right? Like the benefit that I've found in having other Christians who care deeply about my kids speaking into their life, like what a blessing that is as being part of a Christian community. And that it's not all on me as dad, to do that, but there's going to be other men and women who come alongside my kids and bring them along in their faith journey. I think what a blessing that is.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about I really like the word partnership, and I've used it before, but I just wanted to hear how you might define that. I'm thinking about my work when I was an elementary school principal for 10 years before coming to this place. And, we would regularly have parents show up at our front door. Sometimes it was scheduled, sometimes it wasn't. People who were just curious about the school. Yeah. And it was always really intriguing. I loved it. It was one of my favorite parts of the job was sitting down and having a cup of coffee, maybe taking them for a tour. And one of the things, getting to a place in those conversations where I would often ask, the language of deep hope. I would often ask parents, what is your deep hope for your child? Not just, what do you hope for around math programs or athletics or music or But like, above all else, what do you want? And to listen to parents talk about that was really inspiring to me. But one of the things that I would often encourage them, I would try to encourage them, is to try and visit as many schools as they could, actually, like articulate your deep hope, and then visit as many schools as you can. Because in the end, I would try to encourage them to say is, you are looking for a school to partner with.
Right.
And in the end, you want to find a place where, a parent has a vision for their child's education, and a school has a vision for what they believe, education should look like. And we're hoping, you want parents to partner with a school where their vision and a school's vision align. And so when you use the word partner, Abby, I wasn't even necessarily thinking of, parent-teacher conferences, although that's a real tangible way.
Right.
But I was even
As
thinking,
a whole.
I was thinking even too, like you want to partner with institutions, whether it's Christian or public school, actually, or non-faith-based private school or secondary school, or I would even say thinking about post-secondary, where a family or a young adult decides to go to universities, to say, hey, I want to partner to be in a place where the things I'm on about or that we're on about as a family and the things that an institution is on about, that those things fit. I even think about that even for our own vocation.
Sure.
Right? Like what is one of the things that brought me to this place is like, I want to partner in my work, in my vocation, in a place where I feel like, like the things that this university is on about are the things I'm on about.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of a sidebar, but I really appreciate that. But I guess I'm thinking bigger, but
to find that place where those loves align, where they enmesh, right? Like, because this is what I care deeply about for my own kids and for my kids' education, and this is the school's promise statement. I was going to say mission statement. We talked about a mission statement as a promise statement, right? So we say, like, this is what we will promise you as a school. For me as a teacher, this is what I promise to you as a family. I'm going to do these things. That's not something to take lightly.
No, and I guess when I think about partnership, I said one of the things I sometimes imagined as a principal is no institution and no family when nobody gets it right all the time. But overall, I think my hope, or one of my deep hopes as a school leader, was, when a family dropped their child off at our school and watched them walk through the front doors, or even when a family drops their child off at this place and watches them walk into a dorm room for the first time, not the expectation that it will be perfect, that you sort of have this deep peace that you're entrusting your child to a place that is partnering with you. And, Dave, you use the phrase education as formation.
Totally.
Right? That you're dropping your child off at a place, whether they're in kindergarten or they're a university freshman, that they're being formed and shaped, and they're in a place that values overall, not every little thing, but overall values the same things you do. I think that's where a partnership actually starts, right? Is that bigger, who do we want to partner with? So, How about you, Dave? Like, if you think about partnership as either a dad or as a professor, what sort of comes to your mind?
It's funny when you say that. The way you phrase that, I'm picturing, so my kids went to the school that I had taught at, and then I moved from that school to become a professor here, and how that sometimes made interacting with former colleagues, I was going to say complicated, that's maybe not fair, but more nuanced, right? Because I come in always wearing my education professor hat, and I can't take it off, and I'm a former colleague, and so I know things, and But the flip side of that is, when you're part of a community and when you invest in a community, you do get to know the people. And to me, that's the real benefit and the real blessing of this sense of being enmeshed together, right? And if we're serious about partnership, that means some sense of self-disclosure on both parties, right? And so for me as a teacher to be able to say, well, this is who I am, and I reveal that in the classroom with the kids too. But when I'm meeting up with parents, to be my honest and authentic self and trust that they're going to do the same to me, and so that we can share our joys and concerns that we share about your child. That's a substantial thing.
It is a substantial thing, especially when those roles are enmeshed. Right?
Yeah. Because then I wind up doing a professional development workshop for my kids' teachers that
Right.
I worry about that. Like, does this come off like I'm trying to tell you what to do? It's not.
Mhm.
It's not that.
Yeah.
But also, I do bring a particular expertise when I come in.
Right.
Like, oh, like it's
Right.
it gets nuanced.
Yeah.
No, and I do think when it feels like an authentic partnership, how are we able to give each other kind, specific, helpful feedback
Right.
Mhm.
for the sake of the institution or for the sake of the kids? And like I've had parents, and I've when I was a principal, I've had teachers have come into my office
Sure.
and said, hey, like, in the spirit of partnership, because I love you, I just want to give you a heads up about this.
Mm.
And I have and that a partnership has to start with a trusting relationship,
Right. That's
right?
right.
And to receive that, and also trusting I can give that feedback to a teacher, or a teacher to a parent, to say, like, if we're partnering.
It's not going to be a one-way street of information flow,
No,
right?
but-
Like, I need to hear from parents, and parents
Yeah.
need to hear from me, because
Yeah.
we're in this together because we love this child,
Yeah.
and we're
Right.
all on this kid's
Yeah.
team.
Right.
And then to
Right.
think, how do we do that well?
Right.
Right. So, I can think I've made this mistake, so I'm gonna just own that, right? Of being frustrated about something at school and sending an email to that teacher,
Mm.
right? Or sometimes when something goes astray at school, getting an email from a teacher that doesn't, and sometimes it's the easiest way to do it, but
Right.
but I know, like, hey, even in a partnership, how can I make a phone call?
Mm.
Can we have a conversation
Mhm.
face to face as
Yeah.
partners, right? That again, I'm thinking about that restorative practices rubric, right? Like,
Yes.
with versus to, right? Like, how do we do this with each other? How do we have authentic conversations, and partner even that way? So
Mhm.
I think one way schools and teachers partner with parents is by having authentic, as much as possible, face-to-face conversations.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and coming off of face-to-face conversations with my kids' teacher, it's
Yeah.
a very valuable
Yeah.
part, right?
I hope you
of-
had good conferences.
We did,
Yeah.
and I think that, and not because my kids are perfect by any means, right?
I mean, come on.
I've got a 6-year-old who, as one of his teachers said, is in perpetual motion,
Hey, yeah.
right?
I love that phrase.
as 6-year-olds should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think what I value so much about conferences is walking away, and I've always had this at my kids' school. I think of Reese's diagnosis, right, with type 1 diabetes when she was in kindergarten.
Mhm.
I have never felt like my kids were not known and loved
Yeah.
at that school.
Yeah.
And to me as a parent, that's the greatest gift,
Yeah.
right? So I will never forget. And when I walked in, it was her teachers after diagnosis that I talked to, but also I will never forget walking into the kitchen and even the lunch ladies,
Yeah.
the tears and the concern that
Mm.
they showed for her, right?
Yeah.
Like the true partnership of that entire school
Mhm.
around that event for me
Wow.
was very formative
That's powerful.
in my kids' like, just, and for her sake too. She knows she's safe, she knows who to go to.
Mhm.
They are all on board with the way that we want to manage. They're completely supportive. And so when you have a child with a need like that literally is life threatening, right? It puts a whole new spin on that partnership in ways
sure.
that are different
Yeah.
and have shaped our experience there too,
Yeah.
positively.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. Thanks for sharing that, and that is beautiful. And I think that is what partnership looks like, right? Is to say, like, no, your family or your child is so much more than a brain on a stick, right?
Right.
Like,
That's
it's
right.
so much more. And in some ways, like, for me, if I think about that with my own kids, like, I knew and I know wherever they go to school, they're gonna learn. Like, they're gonna learn.
Yeah.
They're gonna get it's actually, I'm looking, when we look for a school to partner with, it's actually all the other things that we're looking for. Like, I'm trusting that that's gonna happen.
Right.
And if there's concerns about that, we'll figure that out. But the schools that we chose to send our kids to, it was about, hey, we want them here because we want them to be known, like, to know others and to be known. And even just one little thing, like, our kids were at a school, and I know traditionally, at least where we were, is for a long times report cards would come out, and then you would schedule parent-teacher conferences,
Yeah.
right? And it's sort of the message there then is like these conferences are to talk about how your child's doing academically.
Yeah.
And one of the schools that our kids was at some point changed those conferences to way earlier in the semester, like totally divorced them from report cards.
Sure.
It was like within the first 5, 6, 7 weeks, I think, of the beginning of the school year. And then the learning target changed for sure. So how's the start? How's the learning? But then the focus really was, hey, let's just talk about how your child's doing. And for us as parents, it was, hey, like we would just like to see that our child is our child known by you. So it was like, hey, how's our child doing? Well, let me tell you how they're doing. No. But how are they doing? Like how are they? Like how's it going with friends? Like do you see them in the hallways? Like do they feel like they're engaged or distracted? Is there anything we need to know beyond the academics that might help us partner together in helping our child succeed in every part of their life? And so I'd encourage even just schools to think about that.
That's such an interesting point though, because it's a structural change that has very personal impacts, right? Like instead of just like
it's a message.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm thinking about that in light of schools are an academic institution first, and so it makes sense that when I'm meeting with parents in a formal way, like at conferences, that we're going to talk and we should talk about academics. I'm not suggesting that.
Absolutely.
But if we believe that students are whole persons created in God's image, doesn't that change what the conference ought to be about then too? And I keep coming back to some of my own experiences as a teacher and having parents want to like read me the riot act for things that and rightly so, right? Like early in my career, I did things that I shouldn't have done, or I left things undone that I should have done. And so they should, hold me to account for that. But it wasn't a partnership kind of a thing. And so much of it was around achievement, grades, how kids are doing in my class. And that's a shame if that's all that conversation is going to be about, right? And so I wonder about other ways then that if schools are locked into a place where that parent-teacher conference is going to be right after report cards and you're going to talk about grades, well, how do you expand that conversation to other ways to have that?
And what structural things can you do to make sure that happens, right? Are there questionnaires? Are there some things in place that help those conversations along?
And I think back to this is 20 years ago when I started teaching, but we tried to call every family in the first 2 weeks of school, and so as a middle school teacher, I'd call my homeroom to make a positive first contact, right? Before we've got some problem out there, right? Now it feels really old school, like you're actually take a couple evenings out of each of those first couple of weeks to actually try to make.
We did that with all of our freshmen.
But and I feel like it
split
does.
them all up.
And it sets a tone, right, to connect with. One of my Twitter friends, Rick Rowe, who's been teaching math for a long, long time, and he often tweets out, like, I'm making good calls home, and that's his hashtag, good calls home. And not because there's a problem, but to like find things to celebrate in his students, and then take the time to actually communicate those things outside of academic achievement. Right? Like, I think that matters.
Oh, absolutely. If I think about myself as a high school student, and if there was caller ID back in the day, I can only imagine what my mom would think every time the school's phone number showed up, right? Because that phone rang a lot, I'm guessing, right? Let me tell you another story. Well, what if for every student that when that that number shows up on the caller ID or whatever, that it's someone from the school saying, let me tell you something about your child that I saw today that I just think is inspiring or beautiful or wonderful, or let me just tell you about an interaction with your child, or let me tell you about something I've learned about your child that I think is delightful. Like who doesn't need to hear that, right? Like parenting is hard work. We all know that, right? And so we all need to be encouraged. So maybe even partnering, right? Good calls home or good emails home. And it doesn't even have to be that long. I'm just going back to the report card thing too, guys, because I'm just thinking about when we put those things together, like, inviting parents in, I think sort of what the message, and maybe not intentionally, I hope not intentionally, is basically if your kids if your kid's doing good, however we define it, you don't need to come in right. And this is only if your child is
if things aren't going
if
well.
Things aren't going well, then we need
Mm-hmm.
to meet, and even that right sort of sends the because the assumption then is if you're doing well means you're doing well academically, and there could be a whole bunch of other things that are worth talking about both ways, even for the parents to share about the child. We know they're doing well. We just want to let you know what else is going on in their life.
For sure.
That so that you can get to know them and support them in every way.
As a whole person.
Yeah.
So one school that I used to teach at, we in the spring semester, in the fall we had more traditional conferences, but in the spring we would have students participate in the conferences. And I always loved this as a teacher. I know the students did always love this by middle school because they're going to sit down with their parents and their teacher and have to talk about and we would prepare things for this. They'd have a portfolio work that they would say, these are things I'm proud of, or things that we were going to share and talk about. And then it becomes kind of a celebration of learning. But the thing I loved about that is it gets it away from just talking about grades. It talks about some of the bigger hopes and dreams that this kid has, and to be able to express some of that to mom and dad and the teacher. And that was pretty great.
Well, and how great for that student to have to articulate.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And for some
celebration of partnership.
Right. That's what I was going to say. For some, that is a terrifying thing for them to have to present. But the flip side of it is, I always come back to, it's you see that my mom and dad and my teachers, they are in this together because they care about me. And at a tacit, deep down level, that's a message that gets formative. Right?
Yeah. My last year at the school where I was principal at, we moved parent-teacher conferences to 3-way conferences. So parents, students, and teachers would be at those conferences, the first conferences in the fall, right? And I understand the question, what if there's something we need to talk about? Maybe.
Right.
But you know what? That's probably not a conversation that you should have in 10 or 12 minutes. And that's probably a bigger conversation. And again, what's the learning target? What's the learning target of the conferences, right? And even if you think that's a hard conversation, might there be a benefit for the student to be part of that? I think one of the other cool ways that we experienced as parents was our kids being at a school where there was a celebration of learning. So an academic pep rally, basically, where the whole school or the middle school did these amazing projects. And then they put them up and down the hallway, and the students had to do different, they dressed up, or whether it was ancient Rome or whatever it was. And you would just go through the whole school celebrating student learning. So that was just such an amazing, not just to celebrate our own kids, but a real communal event of going, people were doing spoken word poetry. There was music happening. There was science experiments happening. And you just walk through the school and you're like, wow, look at all the learning happening across the grades. And I just continue to wonder about how do we find ways to give, for lack of a better word, parents permission to come into the school that. That is beyond hey, come to cheer on a basketball game, which is good. Come for a concert, which is all good. Come and volunteer in the concession stand is all good. But how do we get all these parents in here cheering these students on in their learning, which is the primary reason these schools exist. So I just thought that was one of the coolest ways, these celebration of learning.
My students have had a significant event like that in every grade. Not all together where the whole school does it, but right in first grade they do a talking zoo and a diorama and dress up. And there was a state parade last year, right? They do a Native American fair. Wow. They do, so even that can be done on a smaller scale too, with individual grades if logistics are an issue.
Yeah, and I think just to find ways to draw parents in to celebrate the learning. I think drawing parents in, whether it's a celebration, whether it's with discipline, whether it's good phone calls home, right? Yeah. That in all things that we're trying to say, hey, how do we do this together? Education as formation. How do we do this together? Because we spend 1,000 hours a year with every child. That is a long. That is a lot of time, and so to be partners is absolutely essential.
For sure.
Friends, we know that your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for playing around in the sandbox with us this week. We hope that the Lord gives you what you stand in need of. Finally, we'd like to send you into your day and this week with this blessing. So to our listeners, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace and give you peace and give you peace. Amen. Have a good week, everyone, and thanks for listening.
This podcast was quite literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is an independent podcast created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Thanks for listening.